Hey everyone, welcome to the CyberHub Engage podcast. I am James Azar, and if you're listening to Mustang Sallie in the background, it's because the legendary Sallie Wright is in our studio today. It's awesome to have you here, Sallie. How's it going?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
You know, I've been chasing you for this interview, I think, for like 5 months. It's been a while, and I'm happy we finally got the chance to do this. I'm super excited to have you here.
I'm very excited to be here. I'm looking forward to what this will do.
For those who don't know who the legendary Sallie Wright is, we have to go way back to a CV that puts us all in our humble places. Starting from, for those of you who don't remember, the legendary Red Box of Circuit City before Red Box and anything else, to teaching and working in some of the leading institutions in our nation, from Oklahoma State to UNC Chapel Hills to the University of Alabama in Birmingham and Georgia State University, and finally, most recent role as the CIO for Fulton County in the great state of Georgia. I mean, wow.
Thank you.
I have to say that wow, because I think a lot of times people, you call yourself a nerd. You said, oh, you like right when you walked in here, you said, oh, because I'm a nerd. And I go, no, but I remember you telling me last month that how you started getting in IT, and you were in security, you were in IT, and you started in IT. You started coding like a long time ago. How did you get into that?
So I went to a technical university, and I was in this academic program where I was going to end up as a legal secretary. And I quickly learned that I was going to be doing all the work, and some guy was going to get all the money, because as a secretary, you don't make squat. And then luckily for me, one of the computer science professors was teaching one of my classes, and I learned that if I would talk about computers, then he wouldn't talk about the other things that the class was supposed to be. And I ended up transferring into his area, and it was a great decision. I learned how to program in machine language and in assembler and Pascal and Fortran and RPG and nerd. That was me.
I wouldn't say that. I would say that your background is fascinating, because it went IT, and then at some point it transitioned to security, and then you went academia, and in your most recent role, you were the CIO for Fulton County, which is it the second largest county in the state of Georgia?
No, it's the largest county in the state of Georgia, and it is. It has 15 municipalities as part of it, including Atlanta. So it's very big.
And Fulton County, as a like just general basis, it's. I mean, I live in Fulton County. I know how crazy it is. Although I live in North Fulton, and we kind of like to call ourselves North Fulton for whatever reason. I've learned that I have to separate North and South Fulton County, correct?
Well, Fulton County really is comprised of 3 counties that were combined. So it really is kind of a north and a south thing, but it originally was 3 counties. And the county is very diverse. It's home to so many technology firms. It's a pretty amazing place, I think.
No, it's. I think everyone who thinks of fintech, Transaction Alley, people need to realize Transaction Alley is in Fulton County.
Exactly. It's the 6th major hub of technology in the United States.
That's amazing. And you were the CIO of the whole county.
It was exciting. I'd never worked in government before, and I had no idea. I'm kind of boring. I worked as a CISO too, and so FBI cleared. I'd never been to a jail before. So the jail was part of my responsibility, the technology for them. And that was interesting for me because, when you're a nerd and you're really boring, you don't know anything at all about that.
I don't know that you're boring, but what was the jail like?
The jail is scary in that it's just a world that I'm not familiar with, and there's lots of technology in a jail. A jail is like a city inside of a city. It has a hospital, it has food service, it has laundry service, it's like a hotel. There's training services, so lots and lots of technology needs, and not somewhere that I would encourage anybody to ever want to have to be.
Stay out of jail, folks.
Exactly.
You said you never worked for government before, and Fulton County was kind of like your first government role. How was it different from maybe academia and business? What was the big difference between Fulton County and, let's say, Circuit City or, University of Alabama at Birmingham?
So the biggest difference between government and the other institutions that you mentioned is primarily the way that government functions. It's there's no clear leader or boss because everybody's elected officials, and it requires folks to be able to collaborate in order to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. And as people change, as new politicians win their seats, it changes the direction of where you're going with technology and what you can and cannot do.
I've found it fascinating when you were talking about kind of the different programs you implemented within Fulton County. It was a different challenge altogether in implementing programs, correct? Even the way you spend money and the way you budget it. I think for people who aren't in government, who look and go, oh, I can streamline government. Oh, government needs me as their CIO or CISO. What would you tell them that chill, relax, you're almost better off in business than you are in government?
So I would say that you work harder in government, you make less money in government, but when you're successful with a project, you add more value. The government is very much wanting to modernize, but the challenges are the processes that are in place that enable you to actually accomplish what you set out for. You're given a budget at the beginning of the year, but before you can spend the funds, you have to go before the Board of Commissioners and get their approval. You have to get 4 out of the 7 commissioners to agree on a project, which means you have to have done a lot of upfront work with those commissioners so that they understand what you're trying to accomplish and that they're on board with what you're trying to do. The processes for procuring services and goods is also very, very stressful and time-consuming in that you have to follow all these rules and make sure that you're not doing anything illegal or you're not doing anything that's not following policy and procedure, and that you're being fair to the vendors. So it's very different and it's very time-consuming.
You said you served as a CISO and as a CIO. What would you say was the constant challenge in those roles for you?
The constant challenge in those roles is the people component. It's easy to implement hardware and it's easy to implement software. It's really hard to get people to change. Culture is probably the hardest thing to impact. So as a CISO or as a CIO, the first thing you need to understand is what's the culture and how much change is the organization willing to accept and how fast. I worked for one of those major universities and was asked by the president of that university, how much money did I need to fix security? And I had a security plan that I think it was like $8.9 million. And this has been a good 10 years back. And the president said, okay, if I give you the $8.9 million, can you fix it? And I said, I can fix part of it, but I can't spend that much that fast because the organization can't handle the change. People are the the ones that really make a difference on security. Just something stupid like a phishing attack where somebody puts in information they shouldn't put in, or they share their password, or all these little silly things that really cause it difficulty in both the CIO role and in the CISO role.
I find that when you're a CISO and you become a CIO, you're a more well-rounded CIO. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
I think it is a fair assessment. I think you're a better CIO and a better CISO if you have experience in implementing networks and in implementing hardware like the servers and so forth, and in writing applications and understanding how everything works. I think if you get a person that goes through the ranks and they've only done one thing, then you're not getting the full flavor for the vision.
Well, I think you see that as a challenge because, you said you're a nerd and, being in jail kind of freaked you out. And I don't consider you a nerd. And I'll tell you why. You're very educated. You have a experience that very few people can attest to. You have business, academia, and government. Most people in CISO positions will either come from business or IT.
Mm-hmm.
And if they come from IT, they don't understand business. And if they come from business, all they understand is governance, but they don't understand technology.
It's true.
There's very few that have the mold of understand. To me, and one of the reasons I wanted to interview you for the show, for the podcast, was you've been in every single part of the cycle of developing the next workforce.
Yes.
From the business side of it, you understand what the business needs from an IT and IT security component. From academia, from not only securing in academia, but also working with some of the students in academia to help them get the job skills they need so that they can contribute to the workforce. And finally, in government, which I think, Fulton County, part of Atlanta, and when Atlanta was breached, a lot of people asked why the county wasn't involved in that. And we don't have to get into that if you don't want to, but it was one of those where I don't think the county has jurisdiction over the municipality.
Right. They do not.
Right. So Fulton County, essentially all they can do is just sit and watch.
Or, offer to help. And I think that when the city got breached, that they were very surprised by it. They're just so big, and the systems in government
Are complex.
They're complex, and a lot of them are legacy. And,
Right.
everybody's trying to modernize, but you have to be bimodal. You have to keep the tires on the car at the same time that you're trying to innovate. And if you don't keep the tires on the car and keep the infrastructure fresh, and keep the computer systems that the staff use fresh, then you're not going to be successful with the innovation. So there's a lot of complexity.
Right. I think not a lot of people can bring that point of view that I think a lot of listeners that listen to the show can look at, because when you try to conquer cybersecurity as a challenge, right? And I think a lot of people understand that it is a Micah and I, before you came here, we were talking, and he showed me this meme, and it was like 4 beds, and the CEO bed, the CEO was rolling over. What was the other one? The CFO?
CFO, CEO, and I think the CMO.
All right, yeah, and all 3 were like in bed and either rolling over or sound asleep. But then the CISO bed didn't have the CISO in it.
Yes. And when you're a CISO, you get on a first name basis with the FBI and the CIA, and you're not just,
It's different.
It's different. You can expect to get a call from the FBI first thing, and told one night that the next day they're going to show up, and that you need to have somebody who can read logs available to help them. Especially, higher education has as many hackers on the inside as they do on the outside.
Right.
So, lots of really interesting.
So you hear from a lot of executives and companies, we did that tabletop with TAG. in November. And even though it was an active cyber defense and it was very government, the company, the table to cheer on, was very reluctant to talk to law enforcement initially.
Right.
You've actually done it in real life.
Right.
What tip would you give people who are reluctant to maybe call in for law enforcement? What would you tell them that, is a common misconception?
I think that you always want to make sure you go through your legal counsel, so that legal counsel is providing you with what you need to know, and you want to limit how many people talk to law enforcement. Usually just one person, because they could be deposed to go to court, and not everybody's good at that. So you want to have at least one of your security folks that's really good at that knows what to say and what maybe they should refrain from saying, because it gets very complicated very quickly.
Did you find, obviously I think government and law enforcement kind of go hand in hand. When something happens, typically government doesn't have a choice, but the FBI typically is involved, and Secret Service is almost always involved.
Right.
But in academia and business, that's different.
In academia, you especially for copyright violations, you want to protect the student, because a lot of times they don't have a clue that they're not supposed to be downloading movies illegally and things like that. But on the other side, on the research side and on the staff side, you have to be really careful not to include who needs to be included, because you could be doing research in select agents, or you could be doing some research in the medical field where maybe you've solved cancer, and now you have students from other countries that come in as teaching assistants or working for that take it back with them
and steal the IP. And
yes.
Yeah, I've actually read a very interesting paper last week that spoke of a teaching assistant that went to a university here in the States on specific actual research in cybersecurity, and then took the findings back to their home country and never came back.
I'm sure that happens on a pretty regular basis.
It's almost like in security, when you look at academia, and academia drives a lot of the security research and medical research, and people forget that universities play an integral part for a lot of organizations in doing cheaper research that helps develop the next big drug or the next big program that is the next big breakthrough for all kinds of things. I think sometimes that's overlooked.
And working in the university, that's my favorite part. I absolutely love the research part, and I would work with the researchers and help them with making sure they had business continuity plans and disaster recovery plans, and that their data was secure, and that they were saving their data so that somebody else's research could use their data. That was the biggest gap, I'd say, that we had. And in cancer research, the government finally came out and said that they own the data. And so we put in place, and I was lucky enough to get to be on a committee that defined the security framework for the National Cancer Institute.
When you look at medical research, and healthcare is often a very targeted vector in cybersecurity. They are, hospitals, clinics, the data fetches way more money than credit cards.
Absolutely. The universities also do contracts where they will manage the data, like tissue management.
Right.
All of the tissues that are removed go into a database of it's really interesting. Especially the genomic data. I love that stuff. But, when HIPAA got put in place, and that was such a huge expense for each of the institutions, the medical institutions that were taking insurance. That's what it was based on. If you were taking insurance, you had to be HIPAA compliant. So it was very expensive, but it did enable a lot of the cybersecurity things that needed to be put in place that wouldn't have been otherwise.
Do you feel like, to me, HIPAA, a lot of times we say that if you're secure first, then you're obviously always going to be compliant. But if you're compliant, it doesn't always mean you're secure.
So
Do you agree with that, or do you feel like that's depends on the compliance?
I think that law is way behind technology, and I don't think that's going to change because of the way our government functions. So I think if you're compliant, whether it's regulatory compliance or it's commercial compliance like PCI, it does not mean that you are
Secure.
It's kind of like being ISO certified. Does not mean
that you're secure. It just means you're following a standard.
Right.
And I think there's a difference between standards and security.
There's a huge difference between them.
They get confused, though. The water gets murky depending on who you talk to, right?
Oh, yes.
I mean, we hear about like the different frameworks that are out there, and they're all great, but they're frameworks to help you get secure. They're not really frameworks that make you secure.
And I think you also have to consider that with each of these regulatory compliance requirements, they don't all match up. So you have to do like a metric, a matrix of what do you need for this one versus this one versus this one versus that one. And what you'll find are the gaps. Some are asking for more security than others are, and they're in conflict in some instances. So,
do you feel like as 2000, I want to say that 2018 in terms of breaches and events wasn't as seismic as 2017 was. I think 2017 was worse. I think WannaCry and the onset of SamSam were, I think, worse than what we saw this year.
Or what you know of.
Yeah. I'd say what's been published, because there's stuff that's happened that's not published, obviously, and we're not at liberty to discuss those. But do you feel like 2019 is kind of going to be that smack in the face in terms of security? Do you feel like it's just going to be worse than all previous years?
I think the more smart devices that are out there and the more products that are being used for security, because, if you code securely, that makes a huge difference. If you're not trying to add security as a layer on top of stuff, it's much easier. But all the legacy systems, I mean, if you think the ERP system is 30 years old, do you think it's a secure, really wonderful system?
No.
Yeah.
No. It's funny if I spent time in D.C. and you walk to some, elected officials' offices and you see the device they use.
And there may not be any patch management going with that device.
Yeah, there's stuff that kind of makes you raise eyebrows. I mean, really does. But then there are people that are good, that are trying to do good. And really, I mean, I always say it's always easier to Monday morning quarterback, but it's very tough to play the game. Because when you're watching it from the couch, it's always easy to say, "Oh, I would have done that," and but. It's difficult to be in a role of a CIO or CISO,
yes,
and be in charge of so many different aspects and be expected to be perfect all the time.
I don't think anybody's ever perfect all the time. All you can do is hope that you have the best folks that you can afford in place, or that you've outsourced the things that you can't afford the best folks to be in place for, that you are constantly assessing where you are, that you are following the critical controls, the SAN critical controls, and that you're always looking to make sure that as technology advances that you're thinking through what the security implications are, that you are constantly aware and learning and reading and looking at what's the emerging technology, what's coming next, how does that impact where I am from a personal perspective as well as from the business perspective, because everybody's vulnerable.
there's a lot of discussions happening around security folks today when it comes to not if but when, and then when happens, how do you kind of deal with those specific issues? What kind of advice, as someone who's, you've done it for so long,
Yes.
and you've done so successfully for so long, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's aspiring to be a CISO? Because it's not an attractive position. The title's attractive. For some people, the money's attractive, but the position itself is very, you're a scapegoat. I mean, Alex Tan, who was just here, said, the joke around CISOs is that it's the chief internal scapegoat officer of the company when something bad happens.
So I think as a CISO, it's incredibly important to network, and it's incredibly important to make sure that you know people, okay? In higher ed, they have security organizations that get together, and through EDUCAUSE,
Right.
we're not real good about it in government, but in the other organizations, pretty much they are. And if you're going to be a CISO, you need to get out there and you need to network, and you need to go to as many events as you can and meet as many people as you can, because I guarantee you they will help you if you have a problem. I would also tell you to constantly be going for training classes, going and learning what's going on. Go to SANS, go to RSA, go to as many things as you can afford to go to, and just make sure you are staying on top of what's going on, because you could be the scapegoat. The CIO can be the scapegoat, but if you're doing your due diligence, I mean, that's the best you can do.
There's so many discussions about securing a company's infrastructure. And we started talking about compliance versus security and security versus compliance. What existing threats today? You go to a lot of conferences. You obviously listen to a lot of different, smart people. And I think you're speaking in New Jersey, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit about, what you've got going on. But what are some of the threats that scare you the most today?
That's a great question. I think the scariest part is what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think the scariest part are the people, because you don't know when somebody's going to accidentally do something that's going to cause a huge, huge issue.
And know about it.
Yeah.
Know that they did it.
Yeah.
People do the phishing tests all the time, right?
Right.
In an organization, I'm sure you've done plenty of them in your career. I was at a lecture about 6-7 months ago for the Electronic Crime Task Force that the Secret Service has here in Atlanta. Kevin Walsh.
Oh, wow.
I love Kevin.
Yes.
And he's, when people call me and they say, well, I'm not sure I should call him, I was like, well, you can just call Kevin and talk to him. And honestly, like he's not trying to put you in jail. He doesn't want to make you look bad. He for as far as he's concerned, he's like, just give him the data, let him help you deal with it.
Right.
And I think that law enforcement, whether it be the FBI or Secret Service in Atlanta, is insane, but they're great. They're just, I think Chad Hunt and his team at the
Right.
FBI and Kevin Walsh and his team at the Secret Service are awesome. And if you're from the Atlanta area and you don't know them, then please reach out to us and we will introduce you to these guys. You want to know them. You don't want to not know them when you get the phone call. I promise you that. But we were at a presentation by a chief information security officer for a very large organization here in Atlanta. And he was talking about his phishing numbers. And he was talking that only about 15% of the organization failed the phishing test.
That's good.
That's great. My question, though, was how many of those 15 that failed it realized that they failed it? Like reported the fact that I think I may have clicked on the wrong link. Because to me, that's the ultimate test. That's the number. That's my secret sauce. My secret sauce is how many people really clicked on it realize they may have clicked on something bad. I hate the phishing test where once you click on it, it goes, this was a phishing test and you just failed. Please complete this training. And your boss is going to know about this. I don't like those phishing tests because I feel like once you've clicked on that link and you've realized you failed, you've learned nothing from it. And you're just, I think that the psychological, and this again comes from my different background in cyber, is my psychological attitude at that point is I just failed at something that my boss is going to know about, that his boss is going to know about. I'm going to appear on a list. So now I'm worried I'm going to get written up or something bad's going to happen. I got to do this training, which I'm not really listening to because I'm frustrated and I'm worried about what just happened to me. I like the phishing test where the employee gets it, doesn't realize he got it, clicks on the link, and then he goes, wait a minute, something isn't right. And then he either calls the help desk and goes, hey, I just clicked on a link and I think it's bad, or reports it as phishing and sends it up the chain. I think that's the real number. How many people clicked it aimlessly and just moved on?
I've seen it be very effective if you don't yell at them through their screen, but you call them and say, hey, we were doing this little phishing test and you pushed the wrong button. I'd like to come see you. If you can do that, they'll never do it again. And if you can do that for the executives, and the IT people, that's where your big threat is.
Well, I always say that when you do a phishing test, I've seen all the phishing programs out there. And no disrespect, there's some great phishing programs out there, and there's some great vendors out there, and they're a key component of this ecosystem and companies' ability to stay safe and protected when things happen. But I will say this, I've seen phishing tests that don't really fall into the ability to customize them for an organization. So when I look at an organization and I look at it from an attack vector standpoint, I am writing a different phishing email to different people in different parts of the organization. And I'm signing it differently. I'm sending it differently. There's a lot of, I haven't seen that level of sophistication yet reached the phishing.
So I've seen it where we did the phishing test and the results were horrible and management got really, really mad that you had the audacity
to test
them. So it's, you want to give heads up, I guess, to the right people, but at the same time,
they're a lot of times they're more susceptible.
Yes.
Because they work at a higher pace. They want to answer emails. They want to open attachments because that's how they typically get their files. Right? They're waiting for a report. They're waiting for an invoice to get something that grabs their attention about a possible deal, a possible sale, a possible, business situation. And they're more likely to click on those. They're more likely to open it.
Yes, they are. Absolutely. And, you end up cleaning a lot of things up as a result of the actions that they take. So,
do you feel like there's a way to, you said people scare you the most.
Yes.
Do you feel like there's a way to, I've asked this question a lot to other guests that I've had on the show, but do you feel like there's a way to eliminate people?
So I think the artificial intelligence and machine learning work that's going on will probably help along the way, but it's going to be a few more years.
But people still open emails. You're not going to get AI to read someone's email.
Maybe there won't be email in the future.
What will be instead of email?
Who knows? Maybe we will revert back to voice.
Wouldn't that be cool? Instead of typing.
Do you realize how much communication an executive gets every day through email? I mean,
you don't want to see my mailbox.
800 a day. And people expect you to open them, read them, and retain everything that was sent. And then you have
and reply.
And reply. And then you have the vendors where you're not interested in their product, and then they send it back to you again, and they keep doing that, trying to make you feel bad because you haven't responded. and you're like, why are you doing this to me? But I think communication overload, hopefully machine learning and artificial intelligence will filter what you need to know.
Have you ever met David Nolan from Aaron's?
Yes.
You should send him a message. David has a great way of controlling his inbox, and it is absolutely amazing. It's like he was on the show, and he kind of shared some of what some of the filters he uses within his inbox to kind of, filter through some of the garbage that comes through. But I always say that any executive like yourself is like, if you want a tip from someone good, talk to David Nolan.
That sounds great.
He's got it down to a science. He goes, I've got levels of filters in my inbox, and
I find that products like Proofpoint really make a difference. Huge difference.
They help out.
Yeah.
It's always good to hear of good products out there that kind of help people. I think products also, it's all about implementation, right? Because you can get a really good product, but if you don't implement it right, you'll hate it.
It's good for both inbound and outbound, though. So it stops you from sending stuff you're not supposed to send, and it also keeps you off the blacklist of trying, spamming everybody.
Yeah. There's a lot of that going on too.
It's crazy. It really is.
Do you feel like the challenge of the development of AI and machine learning over the next, I want to say 3, 4, 5 years, is going to play a bigger role in cyber, but do you feel like quantum computing is the ultimate?
Absolutely. We've been waiting for years for quantum.
Do you feel like quantum, though, would make security a non-issue, or do you feel like it would bring about a greater security threat? Kind of like going from traditional bombs to nuclear weapons. I feel like quantum computing is almost the same way. Like it's going from a traditional bomb to a nuclear bomb. So
you never know what it's going to bring, and hopefully there are those that are studying that to determine what the impact of it will be. I'd kind of like to see homomorphic encryption coming on through, but you just don't know how fast stuff is going to come out. And it's real interesting in the most innovative things come to the consumer market rather than to business, and then
it's a larger market. It's an easier market. Consumers buy stuff quicker than businesses.
That's true. But it sure makes a hardship where the consumer products and then the things we have to deal with in business and in government and in academia just don't keep up.
Well, that's one of those things when we were talking earlier on one of the previous podcasts, we were talking about, Equifax social security numbers and passport numbers after the Marriott breach. And we go, well, what's the new way to have identification? You talk biometrics, and I'm a big proponent of facial recognition because I just feel like facial recognition, there are programs out there that create what's called a facial DNA. So if you ever travel internationally, some countries use this all the time, but they take your photo when you're in customs. And the U.S. does it too as well. If you're a non-U.S. citizen, if you're here on a visa, they snap your photo while you're at the customs booth. They do that because that generates a facial DNA. It's not only an updated picture of you at entry, but then that facial DNA is used in a database and then through networks of cameras, and some countries do it. China has a great handle on this. England, they have an amazing handle on it. I mean, they say you can't pick your nose in London without someone knowing.
That's probably true here also.
To some extent, although you don't see cameras here down every street. Like you can drive down side streets here and not see any cameras. Well, your phones and laptops, yeah, I get it, but still, I'm just saying.
I was over at the Department of Traffic, and I had no idea they see your face while you're driving. That's pretty amazing. It's like
that's how you don't get out of the ticket.
Dang.
I don't think that has anything to do with security. I think that has to do with the fact that people say it wasn't me driving, and they had to get the cameras that say, hey, it was you driving.
I don't know if they're sophisticated enough yet to actually use that picture to do what you're talking about. I don't think so.
I know of some governments, foreign nations, that actually use facial DNA. And one of them is I actually did a report on it for a nonprofit organization, the UAE. So the UAE, when you land in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Sharjah or anywhere, they take your picture at customs, no matter what. The only people whose picture they don't take are GCC, but that's because they already have their picture when they issue you your GCC ID, and it's shared within all GCC nations. But everything there has cameras. In fact, Abu Dhabi has more cameras per capita than London, even though it's much smaller than London.
So you probably would not want to go there on vacation.
Well, a lot of people go there on vacation, but what you don't realize is, I don't know if you remember the story in 2010, the Israeli Mossad assassinated the Hamas weapons guy in Dubai at a hotel. It was a very big deal. I mean, the pictures and videos that came after that, what Dubai police exposed, was the entire movement of all people who came into Dubai. So the 17-person assassination squad, they had their entire movement for the whole time they were in Dubai, from the moment they landed till the moment they departed.
So you don't really need a court system then?
Well, the court system there is a little different. I mean, privacy doesn't exist there. You don't have privacy.
Do you think privacy exists here?
I think we have the illusion of privacy here. We have an illusion of privacy. We feel like we're entitled to privacy, but we don't have privacy by our own choice. When you post everything on Facebook and Instagram, you've given up your privacy. You don't need to even look at the NSA or anyone else to be like, oh, you've willfully given that up.
It's like going to Disney World and getting the little band, and it tracks.
He was just there. He had those bands.
Every move that you
Every
make.
move you make, how long you stand in a line, what you're doing, what you eat, where you walk, where you stand, where you're taking pictures. They know everything. But that's how they customize the experience. That's how they take those Disney. I mean, what they do with the data they get, the way they optimize it, the stuff that they do with it is just unbelievable.
We considered that technology for higher education, but freshmen are really bad about losing stuff. I know, it's bad.
Wouldn't it be funny though if like freshmen actually, if higher education, if students in higher education facilities were held to a higher standard than what they are today?
That would be great.
It's funny. We have a lot of interns here in our office, and you don't see them here today because, well, it's holidays and a lot of them are off, and it's only 3 of us here today, and it's all boys. Typically, Fridays is Pajama Friday.
It's a great idea.
No, we call it Journey Friday because we listen to Journey on Friday. We love Journey here. I'm a big Journey guy. Love Journey.
Steve Perry.
Love Steve Perry. I wanna go back to the days where I had a mullet, like Steve Perry, and we're like cut off, like like tank tops and like machine washed white jeans. I mean,
Hey,
that was
not?
fashion.
Why not?
The mustache. I tried to grow a mustache once. My wife threatened me with divorce.
You have one now. You must have.
Well, she's traveling. So I can grow a mustache. Although what I like to do at home is when I'm trimming my beard, I'll leave the mustache on and just wait until she realizes that I haven't taken the mustache off.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And then she'll be like, "What are you doing? You take that off. That is not cool. That is ugly." But it's a higher standard. You do a lot of charitable stuff. You sit on a lot of different boards.
I do.
Tell us a little bit about some of that work you're doing.
So I sit on the Power of My Learning board. And Power of My Learning is such an amazing organization that has learning management software and gives laptops to underprivileged families and underprivileged schools, and learning management software helps the parents and the child be more
engaged technologically.
Thank you. They actually used the software and had all the CIOs do "Are you smarter than a 6th grader?" and we were up against each other. We'd never seen the software before, and it's gamification software. So, there's cars running around, and there's decimals down here, and there's fractions down here, and you got to match it, and word matching and all kinds of stuff. Very, very exciting. But Power My Learning helps families.
What kind
so
of
much.
programs do they teach? Mostly coding, or is it?
No, it's basics. It's math and science and English.
So it's STEM stuff mostly.
It's primarily, yes. We actually used it in the juvenile court system, and we had a lot of young men actually get their GED. If you're 14 and you get kicked out of school and you can't go back, you can't get your GED till you're 16 years old. And
So what do you do for 2 years?
Well, at Fulton County, there's a computer lab where you can go and you can learn.
So tell me, a 14-year-old who gets expelled from school doesn't end up in a computer lab. They typically end up in juvie within a few months.
They do. Well, these kids go to juvenile court, to the computer room on their own accord, and they learn, and they act like they're going to school. And I think the last count, and I helped her establish the computer lab when I got there. The last count, we had 16 young men get their GEDs. So it's amazing.
Good for them.
It really is amazing. So that Power My Learning has been a wonderful thing to be a part of. I also sat on Georgia State University's CIS board, and I sat on Georgia Piedmont's CS board, and
Georgia State, David Maimon is the professor now for cyber, and he is doing an event February 1st, right? He kind of has he has a criminology look at cybersecurity. It's a very interesting, I really like him. But very quickly, powermylearning.org. So that's the organization where Sallie is on the board, powermylearning.org. Go to their website, check it out, donate, help them out. It's a national organization, but they do some really, really good work. Very important stuff. And Georgia State, their cyber program is starting to gain a lot of traction locally. I mean, people used to think it was Kennesaw State and Georgia Tech, but Georgia State has crept into that discussion now.
Absolutely.
And really,
my current mentee is in that program at Georgia State. Every semester, I get a new student that I mentor, and I introduced him. I took him to the Power My Learning holiday party, and all the CIOs said, "Here's my card. I'll hire you when you're done." So it's really cool.
Well, it feels like we have interns from Georgia State here as well, and Kennesaw State, and they're about at the same level. And I won't mention other universities because that's not the purpose. I mentioned that, but I feel like Kennesaw State and Georgia State are getting the curriculum on a practicality standpoint a little bit better than some of the others right now. So, it's not as much academic as it is business and hands-on.
So with Georgia State, what you will find is these are the kids that are going to stay in the Atlanta area. Some of the other schools, their graduates are going to go all over the place. But Georgia State's, before they merged with Georgia Perimeter, about 60% of the kids came from homes that made $25,000 a year or less.
Oh, wow.
So Georgia State did this amazing data analytics and determined what needed to happen in order to keep the kids in college, because if they needed money, they could not go to their parents. So they established these small scholarships. So like your financial aid check is going to be a week late. Well, you go to a counselor will help you get the little bit of money that you need to continue on. Because if you're going on the Hope Scholarship and you ever leave, you can never come back. So it's really important because Hope pays 85% of their schooling. So it's really amazing what they've done.
It's fascinating to see your track, and now you're soon, hopefully next year, you'll start a new kind of
adventure
and another one. And are you gonna go? You think you're leaning more private or enterprise, or?
There are so many options.
Yeah,
There are so many options.
You're in high demand.
I love higher ed. That's like my
Passion.
My passion. I like to have the ability to hire the students to work for me. Just one semester makes a big difference on whether they get a job and how fast.
Yeah, it does.
So I love that. I also love manufacturing. I worked for Dixie Cup for like 12 years. Love that kind of thing. So we'll see. It's going to be an adventure.
Well, if you're listening and you need a chief information security officer or chief information officer and you haven't called Sallie yet, you're missing out on a very, I think, unique holistic approach to IT and IT security in an organization because of your background. I feel like that's like one of those where very few people are able to view it, and you're able to view because all of your roles, you're literally in the center, and you're watching. You can see the entire cycle, and you can map out that cycle, I think, better than almost anyone else.
Thank you.
Yeah, crazy.
It is crazy. So I'm getting ready to go to New Jersey in a few days, and I'm going to be
You're speaking at
NJ Edge.
Uh-huh.
And NJ Edge is a company that provides networking to government and higher education in New Jersey. The CEO is Dr. Sam Kahn, and he used to be the CIO for Kennesaw State. Not Kennesaw State, Southern Poly.
Okay.
Great guy. I'm going to speak on digital transformation and
EdgeCon, 12 days.
It's NJ Edge.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to going up there. I hope it doesn't snow because I hate snow, but that's going to be a lot of fun.
That is, I've never had anyone be excited to go to Jersey, though.
Oh, Jersey can be beautiful if you're not, well, there's
In Jersey.
Oh, that's a terrible thing to say.
I went to, a few years ago, we went to a Coldplay concert at MetLife Stadium in Jersey. But we're staying in the island of Manhattan. And when we finished the concert, it took us 3 hours.
Only 3.
To get to Manhattan, to get to Midtown.
Huh. Only 3. That's not bad.
At 11 p.m.
I'm making fun of you. It's not fair, is it?
No. I should have taken the subway. I don't know why. I think we were so tired. Like, when you're at a concert and you're on your feet for and it was Coldplay, and they brought Michael J. Fox on stage.
Oh, wow.
And he played the guitar. They did the Back to the Future. They did the 2 Back to the Future songs. I have it on video. I will send it to you. And Michael J. Fox just absolutely killed it. I'm not a big Coldplay fan, but when Michael J. Fox came, I love Michael J. Fox. I grew up on Michael J. Fox. So to me, to see him, with Parkinson's and everything he's going through, to come out there and play and shred the guitar. I mean, he shredded it.
UAB has been making significant promise of new drugs for Parkinson's and for curing that. UAB does all kinds of amazing research.
University of Alabama, Birmingham, folks. And Birmingham is also a very, very interesting ecosystem.
The UAB is the largest employer in the state of Alabama, and such a wonderful school and phenomenal medical facility. I mean, I don't see anything better than UAB.
Wow, that's strong.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of Emory here would probably stand up and be like, "Hey, what about us?" But
I have my experience with them.
Love it. Sallie, thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you.
I really do appreciate it. If you're listening, watching CyberHub Engage, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at CyberHub Engage. Micah, what am I forgetting? Anything? No. Micah Smith is our technical director. Sallie Wright, Mustang Sallie, who is our guest. And we are all set for this episode. Come back with us next time. My name's James Azar. You're listening to the CyberHub Engage podcast. Thanks for listening.